Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to The Caring Economy with me, your host, Toby Usnik. We've now just finished our 5-year anniversary, going into our 19th season, and I'm really grateful to all of you listeners and viewers and what you've done to support our 30,000 on LinkedIn and 3,900 on our newsletter. Today, we get the privilege of having Ross Dickman as our guest. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Hire Heroes USA. It's the nation's leading nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering U.S. service members, men and women, veterans, and military spouses as well, to succeed in the civilian workforce. Ross brings a remarkable blend of both military leadership and nonprofit expertise to his role. Before joining Hire Heroes USA, he served for over a decade in the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service. As an AH-64D Apache helicopter pilot. I'm a pilot as well, as some of you know, so I'm curious to swap stories around aviation. With multiple deployments in Iraq, earning distinguished awards such as the Air Medal and Bronze Star. Ross holds a Bachelor's of Science in Comparative Politics from our very own U.S. Military Academy, just up the road from us in the Hudson Valley in West Point. And he has a Master of Arts in Organizational Psychology and Leadership from Teachers College, Columbia University, also an alma mater of mine, and an MBA from the University of Georgia. This guy is educated and kind. Can't wait to talk about it. Anyway, since joining Hire Heroes USA in 2016, he has led groundbreaking research programs that have served as and has served as COO before becoming CEO in 2024. Under Ross's leadership, the organization continues to innovate and expand its impact, helping over 100,000 veterans and military spouses find meaningful careers. Ross's vision is deeply rooted in his commitment to service, leadership, and creating pathways for veterans to thrive in the civilian life. And I also need to give a shout out at the top of this to our mutual friend and colleague, Julian Leone at Goldman Sachs, who's been the conduit to two of us meeting and connecting and having this interview. So welcome to the Caring Economy, Ross Dickman.
Thanks so much, Toby. It's great to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity.
You did get a lot of degrees. I want to hear I have as well. I want to hear, before even that, a little bit of your life narrative, how you got where you got, where you're born, how you were raised, how you found your trajectory, because we all know everyone has their bumps and their fits and starts and mentors along the way. So give us a 2 or 4 minute digest of Ross's life and how you found your way.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's a generational military service is a big part of that story. My grandfather served in World War II. I have his high school yearbook here actually, and he had enlisted before graduating, and so you can see, instead of like have a nice summer and stuff like that, it's his classmates writing like "Be safe, come back," that because they know he was going straight to Europe. My dad and his two brothers all served in the army and made careers of it as well. And then my older sister served in the army. I served in the army. My little brother was smart. He joined the Air Force, got amazing, beautiful assignments around the world. That really, to me, it was kind of, you have to earn your kind of opportunity. We didn't have enough to kind of have gifted education, just that you could take for granted. You had to kind of fight and scrap for it. And you also had to stay active in a lot of ways. Like one of our family rules growing up was, didn't matter what sport or club, but you had to be active in a sport or a club every semester, no matter what.
And where
And I
was
think
it
it's,
you grew up? I'm sorry, Ross.
oh, all over. I was born in Tallahassee, Florida. I grew up in Germany, England, Colorado, Virginia, Pennsylvania.
Military brat,
Um,
say, yeah.
just every 18 months or so, moved to a new area. One point in time, I think I had a British accent and a German accent and you name it. But moving around so much, jumping right into clubs, jumping right into sports and stuff like that, it was a great way to meet people, to foster connection, kind of figure out who you are as a follower, figure out who you are as a leader. And along the way, I had gone on a ski trip to upstate New York kind of area. And as part of that, we stopped by and saw West Point and got a chance to tour the barracks and meet cadets and stuff like that. And I remember I was in eighth grade and I was obsessed.
Smitten, yeah.
Um, Thought this is where I want to go to college. This is it. And I knew it was a lot of hard work and worked hard on that. And was very fortunate that the opportunity did come together. Like there's a tremendous amount of kids who work hard every year, and there's less spaces than there are interested, hardworking, tremendous young men and women. And so I was very appreciative of that chance that I did get to attend. It was great and made lifelong friends there.
Your parents must have been very proud of you as well. I mean, it's such a prestigious institution.
My dad actually wanted me to go to Florida State where he went. But,
Did your brother go to the Air Force Academy or he just
he did
went?
not. No, he enlisted in the Air Force, and my sister went to a state school in Pennsylvania, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. They have a tremendous ROTC program, and in the end, though, the kind of what stood out was for all of us is we had to find a way to make those ends meet on our own, and my parents were there to be supportive and encouraging, and keep us accountable as well. But nothing was going to be handed to you.
Yeah. Well, I feel similar affinity with you. My stepdad's career took us around the country, moving every 2 years. So my four brothers and I became quite nimble and I think are comfortable enough with change. And also infused with that upbringing, and it's obvious to me with your family, it's the case, is a commitment to service of something higher and beyond
Mhm.
self to community, but not just to oneself or one's, self-aggrandization. So I wonder, can you talk, let's build from that. You do your military service education. You are continuing to serve with your peers, and that call to service is commendable, but I wonder, it must get tough, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think particularly, and your grandfather, and you could probably debate this, but I think those who came back from World War I were the greatest generation ever. Those who came back from Vietnam are often vilified and, seen as traitors. So it's been your space, the military, I think, has been a ever evolving space. And I wonder how you stay positive and of service, and those that you serve, how you keep them positive and of service.
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, it is challenging, right? The military service, you are accepting that you don't have authority or autonomy on a lot of decisions that are made in terms of how the use of force is done, kind of how do we position the country from a national security lens and perspective, as well as like swearing an oath, to support and defend. That means you go where you're told, and you're expected to exercise professionalism and military leadership as a
Mhm.
profession as well, which means adhering to kind of laws of armed conflict and the rule of law, and so that you are the smallest piece of a strategy that you can't enforce or that inform, but such a critical component of upholding the rights and values and ethics that we build our country off of, and decisions that are made at that smallest single person point end up as reflections of a national value structure.
Yeah.
So it can be daunting and tiring. You think of frontline leaders that have challenges of figuring out how to balance all of that type of effect. The other part too is that the military is a tremendous equalizer. Everyone just comes in and builds their identity around the team.
Yep.
And there are certainly challenges around that later and redefining your individuality and personal mission. But at that time, that's what you need out of that military is this team orientation and integrated. We are all here rolling together and serving
Yep.
each other to serve the nation. As a result, it's, perhaps the most ethically fair, in terms of opportunity index around, what you invest into your own leadership and time and energy and effort
Yeah.
has the correlating outcome to opportunity.
I agree with that. And from the outside looking in, I've always said I think that the military service and perhaps community college systems and
Yes.
state universities are great societal escalators. They allow people the ability to go further, farther, faster, get educated, form a career, particularly for Americans who are still in many ways, I think, isolationists. When you're in the military, as you said as a kid, you went to Germany and those other places, you know better than those who never leave this country what you are fighting for, what you're willing to die for. And I think you have a greater appreciation for that, as well as the other in those other places. So I'm a big advocate, even though I haven't served myself, I'm a big advocate for voluntary military service because of that. Also, the other thing is the diversity piece. You think about how many
Mhm.
immigrants who actually become service people and I don't think a lot of Americans appreciate that. Would you agree?
Yeah, we see overrepresentation, I think, as well, and both from access to opportunity, education, and the rest. What's interesting too is like you learn so much through the military, even if you're just stationed in America, around the calling to American ideals that bring people. So foreign people born in foreign countries can come and serve in the U.S. military and serve to drive our values. I think that's amazing, and there's a path to citizenship from there. Even people from kind of U.S. territories, and I remember having soldiers from the Federated Islands of Micronesia, from Guam, from Puerto Rico, from Palau, countries and territories I didn't know what they were. I thought I was well informed on geography. I'd never heard of Micronesia. And then, learning about what it's like to be from those territories and now serving in our country based out of Texas. And then, how does that move from a territorial into a citizenship path? And you learn so much about the people to your left and right through that service, and so much about the communities that you go out into.
Yeah.
I worked with NATO countries and went to a U.S. school, a U.S. international high school, where we had people from Turkey and Sweden, Norway,
Yeah.
Denmark, you name it, any NATO or countries trying to get into NATO, like or had students in the school. And so you're meeting people from different backgrounds all the time. And it was
Yeah.
just truly eye-opening opportunities.
Yeah, and it can't be just about you, right? I mean,
Yep.
particularly the military. So if we stick with contemporary times, because the evolution we talked about the military, can you sort of set up the stage for Hire Heroes USA? Like, what's the mission and the how did it come to be, and what would you want our audience to know in terms of, I don't know, what's broken, what's not broken, what needs to be fixed, why you guys exist and gals?
Yeah. Well, we are celebrating our 20th year as an organization this year. So, the mission of Hire Heroes USA is to empower transitioning military members, veterans, and military spouses to succeed in the civilian workforce. Kind of where did that come from is 20 years ago, our founder, Mr. John Bardis, who worked in healthcare, he had met some soldiers at Walter Reed Medical Center. And one of the stories really stood out to him as an individual kind of grappling with his post-injury life. And what was most weighing on him was what is his career identity going to be? Kind of who will he be after this? And so as John kind of looked into that, he started realizing that this is a pretty common problem, not just to individuals who have been wounded in the line of duty, but to high-performing members of the military who are just really struggling to figure out where they fit. And there are amazing case studies of individuals who've gone on to do outstanding work and CEOs and chairmen of the board and all the rest. But at its core, we shape the military to do a specific mission. And then as they're departing, trying to figure out where those skills actually fit in the economy isn't always an easy 1+1=2 kind of equation. Like, for me, the helicopter that I flew, it's a platform, it's a tank in the sky, essentially. It has missiles and guns and rockets, and it's heavily armored, and it's meant to be the point of attack. Well, there's not really a lot of jobs that require me to shoot a missile off a helicopter after the Army. I mean, I keep pitching it to different companies. Like if you ever have a competitor that you need to kind of blow up their building, it's no one's taken it up yet, but soon. So when you think like on at the surface level and how a lot of hiring definitely has been happening over the last 20 years, it's trying to look for the easiest translation, the easiest, industry specific or role specific experience.
Yeah.
From that kind of a lens, military members really run into challenges in terms of where their skills fit because there's not a one-to-one usually. Layered onto that as well is just the challenges of representation of what do you do in the military and how does that fit in a team, and maybe misunderstanding in terms of the kind of mass media cycle that we have now around what is someone leaving the military going to be like? Are they robotic in nature? They don't have a sense of humor, or are they broken or damaged and all that kind of stuff? And, you know, I think about it, it's not that the system is broken. There's always going to be a transition challenge, though, because we've shaped people to do a specific job in the military. And now we have to give them space and time and systems to help them now recontextualize and move back into society to be the value creation and differential change that they can be.
And their
Um,
families as well.
and their family is a huge part of that. The family is what sustains that all volunteer service as well. When we think about why does it matter? Why should anyone care about this? If they're not in the military or don't know individuals who've served in the military, I think, you mentioned it. We have an all volunteer military force. Strong military is always going to be a part of our national identity as Americans. And I don't think a draft is the way that we want to go about, fulfilling that obligation. An all-volunteer force allows for not only a more professional force, but also allows for everyone in society to have more of a vote and an influence in what do they achieve, where do they go, what are the paths that they take. But to do that well and sustainably, we have to think about the national strategy around that, which means the transition back into being members of community, members of industry. How are their families included in it? So we aim to solve that by being very disciplined just on employment. It's a cornerstone of identity in our society, and we aim to help them translate and transition into roles where not only are their skills used and they feel personally fulfilled, they have opportunities to grow and they gain community interaction as well.
Mhm. Ladies and gentlemen, again today on the Caring Economy, we're thrilled to have as our guest Ross Dickman. He is the CEO of Hire Heroes USA, focused on veterans and helping them really build their careers once they come back from service and support their families as well. Ross, what's the best way, put this right out there, what's the best way to be in touch with you or Hire Heroes USA if someone wants to get involved, learn more, support, hire, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. If they want to hire veterans, go right to our website, hireheroesusa.org. Type it in right there. If you know a veteran that's struggling, like they are about to leave the military, or a veteran in a community, or a military spouse that is unhappy or unsatisfied in their work, same thing. They can register for our free services. It's always free for the veteran and the military spouse for as long as they need. They can use it as many times as they want. If they called to support this mission, I mean, there are multiple ways to do that. One of the things that I think is often overlooked is we have about 6,000 volunteers who are just members of the professional industry. Most of them are not veterans, but they engage in one-on-one coaching and mentoring interactions with our clients. Maybe that's a mock interview. Maybe it's someone wants to come into the career field that you're an expert in, and they just need some really specific guidance around that. So we're always asking for and looking for support in that regard. And then donations, obviously, to help us be free to any veteran and military spouse, donations through the website, or we do accept kind of any mechanism of that from, estate planning aspects to Bitcoin and whatever else you'd like. Or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do use a lot of networking on LinkedIn, and there's, I think, only two people with the name Ross Dickman on LinkedIn. One's me, the other's a weatherman in New York City. He's phenomenal. I
Say
follow him
hello.
anyway, so hit us both up and get some great advice on the weather.
Thank you for that. Ross, I want to maybe give some shout outs to any corporate friends, allies. I know, for example, JP Morgan has a pretty robust program for vets. And then our mutual friend and colleague, Julian Leon, Goldman Sachs has their program, but also he was one of the co-founders of VOWS, Veterans on Wall Street. So
Mhm.
the alumni network is strong there. But are there any brands you might want to give a shout out to only to indicate what success looks like if other businesses are thinking about following that lead?
I'll spotlight a couple, I guess. First is, one to call out is Wells Fargo has done an amazing job of really aligning their veteran talent and military spouse talent strategy from top to bottom. And so it's structured in every part of their business practices. It's fully endorsed from executive leadership, and they're active, engaged, in creating accessible pathways for, military members and military spouses to enter the finance industry and banking industry. One that I think gets overlooked that's a tremendous services organization and franchise model is Service Master Brands. Specifically, Service Master Clean, Service Master Restore. if you've got, major enterprise cleaning, commercial cleaning, or had an incident from, a flood or landfill or whatever that
Fires and things.
requires repairing your business. This is a mission-based organization that really has leaned into wanting to be a big part of the community integration of veterans. And with their franchise model, veterans are hired in franchises, encouraged towards franchise leadership. And again, what's stood out is from the executive leadership and even the private equity groups that are supporting Service Master is it's part of their entire business enterprise, making huge impact
Oh,
nationally, but also, and what really stands out is franchise leaders making a difference right there in the community that they live in as they're supporting people through some of the hardest times of their life. And then I'll say just especially from a technology and skills and accessible pathways, Walmart has been doing some amazing work towards skills translation for military service members and pay equity components that have really stood out. So really pushing the national strategy towards how do we make sure we codify and validate veteran skills
yeah.
so that businesses can leverage them right away. And what we've seen is, businesses grow, the company flourishes, the individuals flourish, and communities flourish from that.
Mm. I'm teaching more and more now an intro course on large language models and AI. And if it's ever helpful to you or your team or your constituents, I'm happy to do a sort of 1 hour Zoom seminar. I find that the technology is incredibly helpful if used effectively.
Yes.
So good on you. I wonder if I'm also on the job market. So when I apply for jobs, there's always that question at the bottom about self-identification, including are you a
Mhm.
veteran? I assume that's a huge sign of success and that that's legally required, but what's that about? Can you elucidate?
Yeah. I mean, there are protected classes of individuals in different EEOC rulings and the rest, and veterans do fall into a protected class. So I'm not an HR person, so I'm sure someone with an HR background will correct my language at some point. But a part of that is around like the organizations being mindful of those areas to make sure that they aren't inadvertently excluding a protected class
Yeah.
from fair hiring practices and fair inclusion practices. What I've seen also moving forward in a really helpful way, though, is groups that have understood that hiring and having clear strategies around veteran and military spouse hiring is a competitive advantage. They use those as primers towards, as well, like helping to foster and encourage employee readiness groups or affinity
Mhm.
groups and those kind of inclusion efforts.
Yeah.
And so the ones that do it well are mindful of what's HR protected information, but like or encourage employees to participate in those ERG
Yeah.
groups. And that then leads to, activated employees. They're fully engaged. They see how their work aligns to the mission
Yeah.
and ways that they can contribute as an individual. And yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just all towards protecting the employee rights as well in that. So when I do see that, I always encourage veterans to participate in that, but a lot of people have different opinions on it and are worried about
You have the
exclusion
option. Yeah.
potentially. Yeah. I'm of the sort of, you know, I don't think anyone there is some unintentional exclusion of veterans that does happen in the marketplace. That is clear from data research and
Yeah.
our friends at Duke University's Veteran Transition Lab have done multiple rounds of research that have shown that there's, exclusion that is happening. There's funneling that's happening that's
Mm.
limiting career options and things like that for veterans. But self-identification of that, I think, is a positive affinity signal that you are willing to go in and lead as a veteran,
Mhm.
and you create that identity that you want to lead with.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit about sort of a two-part question? One is about polarization, and one is just about the federal budget and the debate going on. I know you're an independent organization, but are you affected in any way, good or bad, by the budget discussions? And how do you, as the CEO of Hire Heroes USA, encounter polarization, if at all, and how do you address it?
Yeah, budget discussions will certainly have an impact. It's our smallest portion of funding is federal budget dollars. Most of that is our homeless veteran reintegration work. So we have a few grants that focus on homeless veterans in a few counties across Colorado and North Carolina. Those are funded through federal initiatives. Those have gone through some change. It does lead to some concern around, are we able to still meet the demand for these individuals that require a different kind of care treatment
Mhm.
system, as well as different levels of community integration. And, we're not a housing system, but we also don't want a housing system to be focused on trying to do employment.
Right.
Collaboration is gonna make that more effective overall. So we are kind of keeping a close eye on what does that look like, as well as our concerns just to make sure that about half of eligible veterans do use VA healthcare and things like that. So making sure that as any kind of budget goes through
Yeah.
revision, like what are the quality of life and quality of health factors that are going to be impacted or not, and how can we make sure they're getting everything that they need to sustain and grow after service. As far as kind of partisanship, the hardest part I think on that is what I've learned is that across the aisle, both sides and members of the administration or the legislature or state legislatures do care about veterans issues. They have a strong affinity for it. They want to see a strong military. They want to see strong community economic development, and especially in the areas around their military bases that are within
And many
their
of them have
areas.
served as well, right?
That's it. But there's just a challenge as we're a nonpartisan 501(c)(3). So trying to make sure that we're really clear around the collaboration points and lines that we have so that we aren't inadvertently, giving a perception that we're on one side or the other. So we work with members of the administration, we work with appointed and non-appointed members of the executive. We work with our local congressmen in areas that we have any kind of offices, as well as members of the Senate if we can. And we try to maintain a balance there that regardless of which side of the aisle they're on, if they care about veterans' economic opportunity, we are always here for that conversation.
Go. That's, I've been told before, particularly from a friend at JP Morgan with their robust program, that the vets don't want a handout. They want a job, right? They're qualified. They are ready, willing, and able. So I'm hoping that that sort of philosophy is baking in more and more across the business community. Do you sense that?
I do see that. Yeah, I think that people have realized that it's not like this yellow ribbon kind of bumper sticker patriotism type of thing that maybe was the early 2000s to 2010s kind of discussion. There's been so much research and analysis now that has shown that having strong veteran hiring practices, not again, not a handout, not putting someone in a job that they haven't earned, but recognizing where those transitions and translations are missing the mark and addressing them, it's a competitive advantage. Veterans tend to stay longer, which is runs counter to some of the narratives that were running around for a long time, which was that veterans leave jobs more rapidly than others. They actually, if included in a strong hiring system, stay longer, get promoted faster, and the businesses outperform the S&P 500
Wow.
when rated on index compared to that. So if you're a
That's
business
fascinating.
leader, like, wouldn't that's saving you money while growing your overall organizational performance? Like to me,
Yeah.
that just makes sense.
Yeah, you have LEED certification for environmental friendly buildings. I'm thinking about like the Veterans Good Housekeeping seal of approval. Like if those brands are doing better in part because of that, I didn't know that. It's great to hear that and to amplify.
There's a group that assesses that. It's called the Vets Index, and they measure veteran hiring programs and then compare them to the S&P 500. And for the
Yeah.
last 15 years, it's outperformed.
It makes sense, right? They do it for working moms, they do it for LGBTQ,
That's
so
it.
best
Yep.
places to work. Ross, I'm very mindful of your time and I appreciate your insights and everything. I want to ask you one last question, which is one we always close with, which is pearls of wisdom. When you reflect on your life and sort of lessons you've gleaned, do you have any mantras or pearls of wisdom that you cite regularly that you might want to help someone who's either young and starting out on their career and need a little bit of guidance on finding a purpose-driven career, or other end of the spectrum, those who are maybe disrupted mid-career or late career and risk going negative. But I was wonder what your pearls of wisdom might be.
I say yes to everything kind of in the career search is one of my first ones. You know, even when you don't know what if you're going to like something, you think you might not like it, especially when you're trying to figure that out, say yes to everything. Take every chance, every conversation that comes your way. Recognize what your authenticity comes across like, I think is another big one for me. I had to learn a long time ago. I have a very expressive face. So especially my eyes and like when I am not pleased with something, it's coming through. Like, and so if I'm saying one thing and my face is doing another, even people who struggle to read facial cues can tell like there's a dissonance there. But I also can't be, I think that people have to be mindful of how much do you want to bring your full self into the conversation. You want to bring authentic into the
Yeah.
conversation. That's going to stand out more than anything. Nobody wants to work with someone who's faking being what they're not, and that'll be sniffed out eventually. So, recognize what sets you apart on that. Lean into that as a strength. Take all of those, any of the feedback you get it as a positive, even if it's something you have to work on. Like I should probably get better at controlling my facial cues, but when I do, and I hear from people that, hey, we could tell that it was that you're being honest around that. Like, well,
Yeah.
that's a positive. I'm going to take that positive. The last I'll share is advice I got from my dad a long time ago that when he was in the army, his one of his mantras was, when you're facing a tough problem or something like that, is go ugly early, meaning the part of it that you don't want to deal with, the part that's the most frustrating or the
Yeah.
worst to do that you would just hope it disappears, address it head on. And it aligns a lot with what when I went to Columbia and we looked at organizational psychology about kind of what's happening under the table and things like that. Like, just get that on the table, address what needs to be addressed. You're going to be able to, there's always time to knock out the easy task that takes nothing. But if you
Mhm.
don't address the ugly bit, that's going to bite you later.
Yeah. And emotionally, it's just so draining and fearful. Ladies
Yes.
and gentlemen, I want to thank Ross Dickman for joining us today. He's the CEO of Hire Heroes USA, a great veterans organization. If you want to help or learn more or know someone who could prosper with them, please be in touch. Ross, again, the website.
HireHeroesUSA.org.
There you go. And Ross, I hope you'll come back and tell us about what you're doing in the future, because I'm sure you've got all kinds of great plans and executions that you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Toby. I appreciate it.